Blood loyalty. Disguised as a boy, Lady Rosamund of Whitmore had trained alongside knights for years, hiding her identity. But when Sir Hugh Fitzallen knocked her to the ground and her hood slipped away, his expression darkened. He stepped closer, voice low. "A lady among warriors," he murmured. "Tell me, my lady, does your father know what you have done?" Chapter 1. The Weight of a Secret. The leather of the training sword's hilt was slick with sweat, a familiar sensation that did little to ease the tremor in Rosamund's hands. Around her, the practice yard of Whitmore Castle throbbed with the sounds of steel on steel, the grunts of men exerting themselves, the sharp bark of commands from Sir Gareth, the castle's master-at-arms. But all of it seemed distant, muffled by the roaring in her ears. Today, she thought, the knot in her stomach tightening with each passing moment, today it ends. For 8 years, she had lived a lie. 8 years since her mother had died, leaving her in the care of a father who saw her only as a pawn in the game of alliances, a prize to be bartered for land and influence. 8 years since she had first donned the guise of Robin, a scrawny, quick-witted stable boy who had somehow, miraculously, convinced Sir Gareth to train him alongside the squires. She adjusted the worn leather helmet, pulling it lower over her brow, obscuring the stray strands of auburn hair that threatened to escape. It was a constant battle, this meticulous concealment. Every gesture, every word, every movement had to be carefully calibrated. One wrong step, one hint of femininity, and the precarious world she had built would shatter. The weight of that secret pressed down on her, heavy as the chain mail she wore beneath her padded jerkin. It was a weight she had borne willingly, fiercely, for it was the price of her freedom. Freedom to train, to fight, to hone her skills with the blade, to feel the strength in her own body, to be something other than Lady Rosamund, the docile, obedient daughter her father demanded. A sharp whistle pierced the air, signaling the end of the morning's drills. Rosamund sheathed her practice sword, her movements practiced and precise. She avoided the gazes of the other squires, most of whom were still boys, barely old enough to shave. They treated her with a mixture of wary respect and casual disdain, typical of their treatment of the quiet, unusually skilled Robin. She was an anomaly, a shadow in their midst, and they preferred to keep her at arm's length. Except for one, Sir Hugh Fitzallen. His name alone was enough to send a shiver of apprehension down her spine. He was not a squire, but a fully fledged knight, recently returned from the king's service in the north. Tall, broad-shouldered, with eyes the color of a winter sky and a jawline that could cut stone, he was everything a knight should be, formidable, honorable, and utterly terrifying. He had arrived at Whitmore only a week ago, a guest of her father, Lord Edmund. The whispers that followed him spoke of valor in battle, of a lineage as old as the stones of the castle itself, and of a tragic past that had left him with a haunted look in his eyes. Rosamund had observed him from afar, studying his movements, his interactions with the other men. He was a man of few words, but his presence commanded attention. And he was watching her. She felt his gaze even now, a prickling sensation on the back of her neck. She knew he found her curious. Not in a way that suggested he suspected her true identity, but in the way a seasoned warrior might observe an unproven colt, assessing its potential, its flaws. "Robin!" Sir Gareth's voice boomed across the yard. A word. Rosamund's heart leaped into her throat. She approached the master-at-arms, keeping her head bowed, her posture deliberately slouching. Sir Gareth was a gruff, battle-scarred veteran, but he had a kind heart beneath his rough exterior. He had taken her under his wing, never questioning her origins, never demanding explanations. He had simply seen a spark of talent, a hunger to learn, and he had nurtured it. "You've improved," he said, his voice surprisingly gentle. "Your footwork is quicker, your parries more assured." "Thank you, Sir Gareth," she mumbled, her voice deliberately hoarse. He studied her for a moment, his eyes narrowed. "But there's something holding you back. A hesitation. You fight like a man who fears to draw blood." Rosamund flinched. He was too perceptive. The truth was, she did fear to draw blood. Not because she was squeamish, but because every blow she landed, Every victory she achieved brought her closer to the day when she would have to reveal her deception. And that day, she knew, would be her undoing. "I am merely cautious, sir," she stammered. Sir Gareth grunted. "Caution is a virtue, but fear is a shackle. A knight must be fearless, Robin. He must be willing to face death itself." His words echoed the countless times she had heard them before, yet today they struck her with a new, chilling force. She knew, deep down, that her charade could not last forever. The time was fast approaching when she would have to choose her freedom or her father's will. A shadow fell over them. Rosamund looked up, her breath catching in her throat. Sir Hugh Fitzallen stood before them, his expression unreadable. "Sir Gareth," he said, his voice a low rumble, "Lord Edmund requests your presence in the Great Hall. He wishes to discuss the arrangements for the upcoming tournament." Sir Gareth nodded. "Very well. Robin, you're dismissed. Practice your disarming techniques. You'll need them." He clapped her on the shoulder, a gesture of gruff affection, and then turned to follow Sir Hugh. Rosamund watched them go, her mind racing. The tournament. Another layer of complexity, another opportunity for exposure. She was about to turn away, to seek the solitude of the stables where she could shed her disguise and be herself, even for a little while, when Sir Hugh spoke again, his voice soft, almost a whisper. "Stay." Rosamund froze. She slowly turned to face him, her heart pounding against her ribs. He was standing closer than she had realized, close enough for her to see the faint scar that ran along his jawline, close enough to smell the scent of leather and steel that clung to him. He looked at her, his gaze intense, unwavering. And then, with a swift, unexpected movement, he reached out and knocked her helmet from her head. It clattered to the ground, the sound echoing in the sudden silence of the yard. Rosamund's had slipped back, revealing the cascade of auburn hair she had so carefully concealed. His expression darkened. He stepped closer, voice low, a hint of steel beneath the velvet. "A lady among warriors," he murmured. "Tell me, my lady, does your father know what you have done?" The blood was frozen in her veins. It felt as if the castle itself had fallen silent, and the world held their secret close. Chapter 2. A Knight's Disgrace. Rosamund stared at him, her mind a chaotic swirl of fear and defiance. The words caught in her throat, refusing to form a coherent sentence. She had been discovered. The secret she had guarded so fiercely for so long was now laid bare, exposed to the scrutiny of this formidable knight. His eyes, those piercing blue eyes, held no trace of amusement, no hint of mockery. Only a deep, unsettling intensity that seemed to strip away her disguise, layer by layer, until she stood before him, not as Robin the Squire, but as Lady Rosamund of Whitmore, a woman who had dared to defy the conventions of her world. "Answer me," he said, his voice still low, but with an edge of command that brooked no disobedience. "Does your father know?" She found her voice, though it trembled. "No," she whispered. "He does not." A flicker of something surprise? Disapproval? Crossed his face. He took another step closer, and she instinctively recoiled, her hand moving to the hilt of her practiced sword, a futile gesture of defense. "You have deceived him," he said, stating the obvious, yet the words hung in the air like an accusation. "You have deceived everyone in this castle." I had no choice," she stammered, her voice gaining a little strength. "He would have married me off. To some old, cruel lord. I would have been nothing but a broodmare, a chattel." His expression didn't soften. "And you believed the charade was a better alternative?" "It was my alternative," she retorted, her chin lifting in defiance. "I chose it. I chose to learn, to fight, to be something more than what others expected of me." He studied her for a long, silent moment, his gaze unwavering. She felt exposed, vulnerable, yet strangely exhilarated. For the first time in 8 years, she was not hiding. She was not pretending. She was simply Rosamund, facing the consequences of her actions. "You are skilled," he said, his voice devoid of emotion. "Sir Gareth speaks highly of your abilities. But skill alone does not make a knight. Honor, loyalty, obedience, these are the pillars upon which knighthood is built. You have violated all three. Her cheeks burned with shame. He was right, of course. She had broken the rules, defied the natural order of things. But she had done it for a reason that burned deep within her soul. I know, she said, her voice barely a whisper. But I would do it again. I would rather be a disgraced knight than a gilded cage bird. A faint, almost imperceptible smile touched the corners of his lips. It was gone as quickly as it appeared, but it was enough to send a jolt of surprise through her. A bold statement, my lady, he said. But boldness without wisdom is a dangerous thing. He paused, his gaze shifting to the training yard, where the other squires were beginning to disperse, casting curious glances in their direction. This cannot continue, he said, his voice turning brisk, businesslike. Your father must be informed, and you must be prepared to face the consequences. Rosamund's heart sank. She had known this moment would come, but the reality of it was still a crushing blow. Her freedom, her dream, everything she had fought for, it was all about to be snatched away. What will you do? She asked, her voice trembling. He looked at her, his expression unreadable. I will do what is right, he said. I will uphold the honor of knighthood, and I will protect the reputation of this castle. His words were ambiguous, offering no hint of his intentions. Would he expose her immediately? Would he drag her before her father, humiliating her in front of the entire court? Please, she whispered, her voice filled with a desperate plea. Do not tell him yet.
Give me time.
Time to explain. He hesitated, his eyes searching hers. She saw a flicker of conflict in their depths, a hint of something that might have been compassion. Time is a luxury we do not have, my lady, he said. But he paused, his gaze shifting away from her. I will grant you this. I will not speak of this to anyone until after the tournament. You will have that much time to prepare yourself. Relief washed over her, so profound it almost made her weak. It was a reprieve, a temporary stay of execution. But it was also a challenge. He was giving her a chance to prove herself, to show him that she was more than just a rebellious girl playing at being a knight. Thank you, she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. Thank you, Sir Hugh. He nodded, his expression still guarded. Do not mistake this for leniency, my lady, he said. I am merely intrigued. I want to see how you will handle this. I want to see if you are truly worthy of the blade you wield. He turned to leave, his long strides carrying him quickly across the yard. Rosamund watched him go, her mind racing. He had given her a chance, but it was a chance fraught with danger. The tournament was a public spectacle, a stage upon which her deception would be even more exposed. And yet, she felt a flicker of hope, a spark of defiance that refused to be extinguished.
She would use this time.
She would train harder than ever before. She would prove to Sir Hugh, to her father, to the entire world, that she was not just a lady in disguise. She was a warrior. As she retrieved her fallen helmet, a glint of steel reflecting the determined gleam in her eyes, she knew one thing for certain. The game had changed. The stakes were higher than ever before, and she was ready to play. The shame, however, lingered like a weight around her heart. Chapter 3. Whispers in the Training Yard. The days following Rosamund's unmasking were a torment of veiled glances and hushed whispers. The training yard, once a sanctuary, now felt like a cage, every eye seemingly fixed on her, judging, speculating. Even the familiar clang of steel on steel seemed to carry a new, ominous resonance. She knew the other squires were talking. They had seen Sir Hugh confront her, had seen her helmet fall, had glimpsed the truth. While none dared to speak of it openly, their furtive looks and sudden silences when she approached spoke volumes. Sir Gareth, too, was different. He remained gruff and demanding, but there was a new wariness in his eyes, a subtle distance that hadn't been there before. He no longer clapped her on the shoulder, no longer offered words of encouragement. He simply drilled her relentlessly, pushing her to her physical limits, as if trying to find some flaw, some weakness that would justify his suspicions. Rosamund endured it all, with stoic silence. She poured her fear, her shame, and her frustration into her training. She fought with a ferocity she hadn't known she possessed, her movements sharper, her strikes more precise. She welcomed the physical exhaustion, the aching muscles, the sweat that soaked her jerkin, for it helped to numb the emotional turmoil that raged within her. Sir Hugh, however, was the greatest source of her unease. He was ever present, a silent, watchful presence on the periphery of the yard. He never spoke to her directly, never acknowledged her presence with so much as a nod. But she felt his gaze, a constant, unwavering pressure that made her skin prickle. She tried to decipher his intentions, to read the expression in his eyes, but he remained an enigma. Was he waiting for her to fail? Was he plotting her downfall? Or was there something else, something more complex, hidden beneath his stoic facade? One afternoon, during a particularly grueling sparring session, Rosamund found herself facing Sir Baldwin, a hulking, brutish squire known for his strength and his cruelty. He had always resented her, perhaps sensing that she was different, that she didn't belong. Now, with the whispers circulating about her, his resentment had turned into open hostility. "So, Robin," he sneered, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "Or should I say, Lady Robin? Heard you had a little accident the other day. Lost your helmet, did you?" Rosamund's grip tightened on her sword. She refused to rise to his bait. "I do not know what you are talking about," she said, her voice carefully neutral. He laughed, a harsh, grating sound. "Oh, I think you do. Everyone knows. You're a woman, playing at being a man. A disgrace to the very idea of knighthood." His words stung, but Rosamund held her ground. "My gender is irrelevant," she said. "My skill is what matters." "Skill?" he scoffed. "You think you have skill? You're nothing but a weak, pathetic girl. You don't belong here." He lunged at her, his sword whistling through the air. Rosamund parried his blow, the force of it jarring her arm. She danced back, circling him, trying to find an opening. But he was relentless, pressing his attack, his strength overwhelming her. She knew she was losing. He was too strong, too aggressive. She could feel her stamina waning, her movements becoming sluggish. And then, with a sudden, brutal thrust, he knocked her sword from her hand. She stumbled back, disarmed, defenseless. He stood over her, his sword raised, a triumphant sneer on his face. "Now what, Lady Robin?" he taunted. "Will you beg for mercy? Will you weep like a woman?" Rosamund stared up at him, her heart pounding in her chest. She was defeated, exposed, humiliated, but she refused to give him the satisfaction of seeing her break. She lifted her chin, her eyes blazing with defiance. "I will not beg," she said, her voice clear and steady. "And I will not weep. I am a warrior, regardless of my gender. And I will not yield." A flicker of surprise crossed his face. He had expected fear, submission. He hadn't expected this resistance. He hesitated, his sword wavering. And then, a voice cut through the silence. "Enough, Baldwin." Sir Hugh Fitzalan stepped forward, his expression grim. He had been watching the entire exchange, his presence unnoticed until now. Baldwin lowered his sword, his face paling. "Sir Hugh," he stammered. I was merely you were bullying a defenseless opponent," Sir Hugh said, his voice cold and hard. "That is not the behavior of a knight. It is the behavior of a coward." Baldwin flinched, as if he had been struck. He mumbled an apology and retreated, his head hung in shame. Sir Hugh turned to Rosamund, his gaze softening slightly. He extended his hand to help her up. She hesitated, her pride warring with her need. She had been defeated, humiliated. She didn't want his pity. But she also knew that she couldn't remain on the ground, exposed and vulnerable. She took his hand, and he pulled her to her feet. His grip was strong, firm, yet surprisingly gentle. "Are you hurt?" he asked, his voice low, almost a whisper. She shook her head, her cheeks burning with shame. "No," she mumbled. "Just embarrassed." He looked at her, his eyes searching hers. "There is no shame in defeat," he said. "Only in cowardice. And you, my lady, are no coward. His words, so unexpected, so kind, sent a wave of emotion through her. She felt a lump forming in her throat, tears pricking at her eyes. She quickly looked away, blinking back the tears. She couldn't afford to show weakness, not in front of him, not in front of anyone. "Thank you, Sir Hugh," she said, her voice barely audible. He nodded, his expression still guarded. "The tournament is fast approaching," he said. "You must be prepared. You must be strong. Not just physically, but mentally. You will face challenges far greater than Baldwin." She knew he was right. The tournament would be a trial by fire, a test of her skill, her courage, and her resolve. And she was determined to meet it head-on, regardless of the consequences. The seed of hope began to sprout. She was a warrior, even if the world didn't want to see it. Chapter 4. The Price of Deception. The summons arrived the next morning, delivered by a nervous page who stammered and blushed as he handed Rosamund the sealed parchment. Her father, Lord Edmund, requested her presence in his solar. Immediately, Rosamund's heart sank. This was it, the inevitable confrontation. She had hoped for more time, for a chance to prepare herself, but fate, it seemed, had other plans. She changed from her training leathers into a simple woolen gown, the unfamiliar fabric feeling stiff and restrictive after years of wearing men's clothing. She brushed her hair, attempting to tame the unruly auburn waves, but they resisted her efforts, curling around her face in a defiant cascade. As she made her way to the solar, she passed through the familiar corridors of Whitmore Castle, the stone walls echoing with the ghosts of her past. She had grown up in these halls, had played hide and seek in the dusty tapestries, had learned to ride in the sprawling courtyard. But now, everything felt different. The familiar comfort was gone, replaced by a chilling sense of foreboding. She reached the solar, a large, sunlit room filled with the scent of beeswax and old parchment. Her father was seated at his desk, a massive oak table cluttered with scrolls and ledgers. He looked up as she entered, his expression grim, his eyes narrowed. Lord Edmund was a man of imposing stature, with a thick gray beard and a stern, unforgiving demeanor. He had always been a distant figure in Rosamund's life, more concerned with his lands and his political ambitions than with the well-being of his only child. "Rosamund," he said, his voice devoid of warmth. "You are aware of the rumors that have been circulating about you?" She swallowed, her mouth dry. "Yes, father," she said, her voice barely a whisper. He leaned back in his chair, his gaze piercing. "And are these rumors true? Have you been masquerading as a man, training with the squires?" She hesitated, her mind racing. She could deny it, try to bluff her way out, but she knew it was futile. He had likely heard the truth from Sir Hugh, or perhaps from one of the other witnesses. "Yes, father," she said, her voice gaining a little strength. "They are true." His face darkened with anger. He slammed his fist on the table, making her jump.
"How dare you?" he roared.
"How dare you defy me, disgrace our family name, and make a mockery of everything we stand for?" She flinched, but she held her ground. "I did not do it to defy you, father," she said. "I did it for myself. For my own freedom." "Freedom?"
he scoffed.
"You are a woman, Rosamund. Your freedom lies in obedience, in marriage, in bearing children. Not in wielding a sword and pretending to be something you are not." "But I am something more," she protested. "I am skilled, I am strong. I am capable of you, are capable of nothing but bringing shame upon us." He interrupted, his voice rising in fury. "Do you realize the damage you have done? The ridicule we will face? The alliances you have jeopardized?" His words struck her like blows. She had thought of her own freedom, her own desires, but she had not fully considered the consequences for her family, for her father's reputation. I am sorry, father," she stammered. "I did not mean to cause you harm." He waved his hand dismissively. "Your apologies are meaningless. The damage is done, and you will pay the price for your deception." Rosamund's heart sank. She knew what was coming. He would punish her, lock her away, force her into a marriage she dreaded. Her dream, her brief taste of freedom, was over. What will you do?" she asked, her voice trembling. He looked at her, his expression cold and calculating. I have considered several options, he said. Imprisonment, a convent, even a public flogging. But none of those seemed sufficient. He paused, his gaze shifting to the window, where the sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows across the room. I have decided on a different course of action, he said, his voice turning strangely calm. A course that will not only punish you, but also benefit our family. Rosamund's stomach churned with a sense of dread. What could be worse than imprisonment or a convent? I have arranged a marriage for you, he said, his voice flat, devoid of emotion. To Sir Carroll of Blackwood. The name hit her like a physical blow. Sir Carroll was a notorious figure, a cruel, ruthless lord known for his brutality and his insatiable greed. He was twice her age, with a reputation for mistreating his wives. No, she whispered, her voice filled with horror. Father, please. Not him. Anyone but him. He ignored her plea. The marriage contract has already been signed, he said. The wedding will take place in 1 week's time, immediately following the tournament. Rosamund felt as if the world was collapsing around her. This was worse than she could have imagined. She was being sold, traded like a piece of property, to a man she despised. But the tournament, she stammered. Sir Hugh, her father cut her off, with a sharp gesture. Sir Hugh has informed me of your participation in the tournament, he said, and I have decided to allow it. Rosamund stared at him in disbelief. This was unexpected. Why would he allow her to compete, knowing the risk of further exposure, further humiliation?
But why? She asked.
A cruel smile twisted his lips. Because, my dear, he said, it will be your final act of defiance. Your final chance to prove yourself. And if you fail, if you are defeated, it will only serve to confirm your unsuitability for anything other than marriage. He was using her, manipulating her, turning her own dream against her. He was setting her up to fail, to be publicly humiliated, so that she would have no choice but to submit to his will. And if I win? She asked, her voice trembling with a mixture of hope and fear. He laughed, a harsh, mirthless sound. Do not be foolish, Rosamund. You cannot possibly win. You are a woman competing against men. You will be defeated, and you will learn your place. He stood up, signaling the end of the conversation. Prepare yourself, Rosamund, he said, for your wedding and for your final performance. He left the room, leaving her standing alone, her mind reeling, her heart shattered. She was trapped, caught in a web of her father's making, with no escape in sight. Her only hope, her only chance to reclaim her life, lay in the tournament. But the odds were stacked against her, and the price of failure was too terrible to contemplate. The weight was becoming unbearable, and she felt she was going to shatter under the strain. Chapter 5. A Lady's Resolve. The days leading up to the tournament were a blur of intense preparation and gnawing dread. Rosamund threw herself into her training with a desperate fervor, pushing herself to the very limits of her endurance. She sparred with Sir Gareth, with the other squires, even with Sir Hugh, who, despite his initial disapproval, seemed to have grudgingly accepted her presence in the training yard. He never spoke to her directly, never offered any words of encouragement or advice. But she felt his presence, his watchful gaze, and she sensed a shift in his attitude. He no longer treated her with outright disdain, but with a kind of respectful distance. He was observing her, assessing her, perhaps even admiring her. She, in turn, studied him. She watched the way he moved, the effortless grace with which he wielded his sword, the quiet intensity in his eyes. She learned from him, even without his direct instruction. She absorbed his techniques, his strategies, his unwavering focus. She also began to see him in a new light. He was not just a formidable knight, a symbol of the rigid, patriarchal world she was rebelling against. He was also a man with his own burdens, his own secrets, his own hidden vulnerabilities. She had glimpsed the sadness in his eyes, the hint of a tragic past that haunted him, and she found herself, despite her fear and her resentment, drawn to him. But she dared not allow herself to dwell on such thoughts. She had a tournament to win, a fate to escape. She had to focus all her energy, all her will, on the task at hand. The night before the tournament, Rosamund found herself unable to sleep. She tossed and turned in her bed, her mind racing with a mixture of fear and excitement. She had faced challenges before, had overcome obstacles, but this was different. This was a public spectacle, a trial by fire, a test of everything she was. She rose from her bed and went to the window, gazing out at the moonlit courtyard. The castle was silent, the only sound the distant hooting of an owl. She felt a profound sense of loneliness, a yearning for connection, for understanding. She thought of her mother, a gentle, loving woman who had died too young, leaving her in the care of a cold, unfeeling father. She had always encouraged Rosamund's spirit, her independent nature, but she had also warned her of the dangers of defying convention. "The world is not kind to women who break the rules, Rosamund," she had said. "You must be strong. You must be careful, but you must also be true to yourself." Her mother's words echoed in her mind, giving her strength, giving her courage. She would be true to herself. She would fight for her freedom, for her right to choose her own destiny. She went to her chest, a large, wooden box filled with her belongings. She rummaged through it, searching for something, a memento, a talisman to give her strength. She found it at the bottom of the chest, wrapped in a piece of faded silk. It was a small, silver falcon, a pendant her mother had given her on her 10th birthday. The falcon was a symbol of freedom, of soaring above the constraints of the world, of seeing things from a different perspective. Rosamund clutched the pendant in her hand, feeling its smooth, cool surface against her skin. She closed her eyes, picturing her mother's face, hearing her voice. "Be brave, Rosamund," she whispered. "Be strong. Be free." She opened her eyes, feeling a surge of resolve, a renewed sense of purpose. She would not be defeated. She would not be broken. She would fight and she would win. She returned to her bed, but she did not sleep. She lay awake, the silver falcon clutched tightly in her hand, her mind focused on the challenge that lay ahead. She visualized every move, every parry, every strike. She rehearsed her strategy, her tactics, her plan of attack. As the first rays of dawn crept through the window, Rosamund rose, feeling a sense of calm determination. She dressed in her training leathers, the familiar fabric feeling like a second skin. She strapped on her sword, the weight of it comforting, reassuring. She donned her helmet, the metal cool against her brow. She looked in the small, cracked mirror that hung on the wall, seeing not Lady Rosamund, the pampered daughter of a nobleman, but Robin, the skilled, determined warrior. She saw a flicker of fear in her eyes, but beneath it, a burning fire of resolve. She was ready. She left her chamber and made her way to the courtyard, where the tournament was about to begin. The stands were already filling with spectators, a sea of faces eager to witness the spectacle. She saw her father, seated in the royal box, his expression stern, unforgiving. She saw Sir Hugh, standing near the lists, his gaze fixed on her. She took a deep breath, steeling her nerves. This was her moment, her chance to prove herself, to defy her fate, to claim her freedom. She stepped into the lists, the roar of the crowd washing over her. She raised her sword, the sunlight glinting off its polished blade. She was a lady, yes, but she was also a warrior. And she was ready to fight. The falcon felt heavy in her palm as she opened her hand to let the air flow between her fingers. A cool breeze brushed past her face, and for the first time in a long time, Rosamund felt prepared for anything. Chapter 6. The Falcon's Flight. The tournament began with a flourish of trumpets and a parade of knights, each resplendent in their shining armor, their banners fluttering in the breeze. Rosamund, disguised as Robin, watched from the sidelines, her heart pounding with a mixture of anticipation and dread. She recognized many of the participants, knights from neighboring estates, some of whom she had sparred with in the training yard. Others were strangers, renowned warriors from distant lands, their reputations preceding them. Sir Hugh was among the first to compete, his skill and power evident in every movement. He unhorsed his opponent with a single, devastating blow, the crowd roaring its approval. Rosamund watched him, her admiration mixed with a sense of unease. He was her adversary, her judge, the man who held her fate in his hands. Yet she could not deny the skill, the sheer presence of the man. As the day wore on, Rosamund's turn drew nearer. She fought her way through the early rounds, her speed and agility compensating for her lack of brute strength. She defeated squires and knights alike, her victories earning her grudging respect from the spectators, who were clearly puzzled by the small, unassuming Robin. She tried to avoid looking at her father, but she could feel his gaze on her, a constant pressure, a reminder of the stakes. She knew he was waiting for her to fail, to be humiliated, to prove his point that she was nothing but a foolish girl playing at being a knight. Her most challenging opponent came in the quarterfinals, a seasoned knight named Sir Roland, known for his ruthless efficiency and his disdain for younger, less experienced fighters. He was a large, powerful man, his armor bearing the scars of countless battles. Rosamund knew she was outmatched in terms of strength, but she refused to be intimidated. She used her speed and agility to her advantage, dodging his attacks, wearing him down, looking for an opening. The fight was long and grueling, the crowd falling silent as they watched the two combatants clash. Rosamund took several blows, her armor dented, her body bruised. But she refused to yield. She fought with a ferocity that surprised even herself, her determination fueled by her desire for freedom, her refusal to be defined by her gender. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, she saw her chance. Sir Roland, exhausted and overconfident, left himself open for a split second. Rosamund seized the opportunity, disarming him with a swift, precise maneuver she had practiced countless times. His sword clattered to the ground, and he stared at her in disbelief. Rosamund stood over him, her own sword pointed at his throat. A hush fell over the crowd. Then, a roar erupted, a mixture of cheers and gasps of astonishment. The small, unknown Robin had defeated the formidable Sir Roland. Rosamund lowered her sword, her body trembling with exhaustion, her heart soaring with triumph. She had done it. She had proven herself. She looked towards the royal box, her gaze meeting her father's. His expression was unreadable, a mixture of shock, anger, and could it be? A grudging respect. Sir Hugh approached her, his face also unreadable. He extended his hand, not to help her up, but in a gesture of acknowledgement. "Well fought, Robin," he said, his voice low, but audible to those nearby. "You have surprised us all." It was the first time he had spoken to her directly since her unmasking, the first time he had acknowledged her skill, her courage. It was a small victory, but it was significant. Rosamund took his hand, her own hand trembling slightly. "Thank you, Sir Hugh," she said, her voice hoarse but steady. She had won the quarterfinals, but the tournament was not over. She still had 2 more rounds to go, 2 more opponents to face. And she knew the challenges would only become greater. As she walked back to the sidelines, she felt a surge of confidence, a sense of empowerment. She had proven that she was more than just a lady in disguise. She was a warrior, a force to be reckoned with. She clutched the silver falcon pendant in her hand, feeling its smooth, cool surface against her skin. The falcon, a symbol of freedom, of soaring above the constraints of the world. She had taken flight, and she would not be brought down. She will be free. A new understanding of what she could achieve settled around her like a comforting cloak. The impossible didn't seem quite so far away. Chapter 7. Shadows of the Past. The victory over Sir Roland had made Rosamund an instant sensation. The crowd, initially skeptical of the unassuming Robin, now cheered her name with unrestrained enthusiasm. Whispers of the mystery knight spread like wildfire through the stands, fueling speculation about her origins, her skills, her true identity. Rosamund, however, remained focused on the task at hand. She knew that the final rounds of the tournament would be even more challenging, that her opponents would be even more formidable. She had proven herself against Sir Roland, but she still had much to prove. Between matches, She sought refuge in the relative quiet of the stables, tending to her horse, a spirited mare named Whisper, and finding solace in the familiar scent of hay and leather. It was here, away from the prying eyes of the crowd, that she could shed her disguise, if only for a few precious moments, and be herself. One afternoon, as she was brushing Whisper's coat, she heard a quiet cough behind her. She turned, her heart leaping into her throat, to see Sir Hugh standing in the doorway of the stable. He was not in armor, but wore a simple tunic and breeches, his appearance less imposing, more human. He looked at her, his expression unreadable, his blue eyes searching hers. "Lady Rosamond," he said, his voice low, almost a whisper. It was the first time he had addressed her by her true name since her unmasking. She straightened, her hand instinctively moving to her hair, which was loose and unbound, falling around her shoulders. She felt exposed, vulnerable, yet strangely at ease. "Sir Hugh," she replied, her voice steady, despite the tremor in her heart. He stepped into the stable, his presence filling the small space. He looked at her, his gaze lingering on her face, her hair, her hands. "You fight well," he said, his voice devoid of any hint of mockery or condescension. "Better than I expected." "Thank you," she said, her cheeks warming slightly under his gaze. He paused, his eyes shifting to Whisper, who was nuzzling Rosamund's shoulder. "You have a bond with your horse," he said. "It is a good thing. A knight and his steed must be as one." She nodded, her hand stroking Whisper's soft mane. "She is my friend," she said. "My confidant." He looked back at her, his expression softening slightly. "I understand," he said. "I too had such a friend. Once." His words hinted at a past sorrow, a loss that still haunted him. Rosamund sensed a vulnerability in him that she had not seen before, a shared understanding of the loneliness that came with bearing secrets, with carrying burdens. "What happened?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. He hesitated, his gaze shifting to the distant shadows of the stable. "He was killed," he said, his voice flat, devoid of emotion. "In battle. He saved my life, at the cost of his own." Rosamund felt a pang of sympathy for him. She knew what it was like to lose someone you loved, to feel the emptiness, the grief that never fully faded. "I am sorry," she said, her voice filled with genuine compassion. He nodded, his expression still guarded. "It was a long time ago," he said. "But some wounds never fully heal." He looked back at her, his eyes searching hers. "You remind me of him," he said, his voice barely audible. "Your courage, your determination, your spirit." His words sent a shiver down her spine. It was a compliment, a recognition of her true self, but it was also a burden. She was being compared to a fallen hero, a man who had sacrificed his life for honor. "I am not him," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "I am different." "Yes," he agreed. You are unique." He paused, his gaze lingering on her face. "I have been watching you, Rosamund," he said. "Not just in the tournament, but before. I have seen your struggles, your defiance, your passion." His words sent a jolt of electricity through her. He had been watching her, observing her, even before her unmasking. He had seen through her disguise, had recognized her true nature. "Why?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. He hesitated, his expression unreadable. "Because I see something in you," he said. "Something rare. Something worth protecting." His words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken meaning. Rosamund's heart pounded in her chest. She felt a connection to him, a bond that transcended their differences, their roles, their secrets. He took a step closer, and she instinctively recoiled, her fear warring with her desire. She was drawn to him, but she was also afraid. Afraid of his power, afraid of his judgment, afraid of her own feelings. "Do not be afraid, Rosamund," he said, his voice soft, reassuring. "I will not harm you. I will not betray you." His words, so unexpected, so tender, broke through her defenses. She looked at him, her eyes filled with a mixture of hope and trepidation. He reached out, his hand gently touching her cheek. It was a fleeting touch, A brief moment of contact, but it sent a wave of warmth through her. "I know your secret," he said, his voice barely audible. "And I will keep it."
For now.
He withdrew his hand, his expression turning serious. "But the tournament is not over," he said. "You still have much to prove. And you will face dangers far greater than you can imagine." He turned to leave, his long strides carrying him quickly out of the stable. Rosamund watched him go, her mind reeling, her heart filled with a confusing mixture of emotions. He had acknowledged her, had offered her his protection, but he had also warned her of impending danger. What did he mean? What dangers lay ahead? And what was the true nature of his feelings for her? He seemed to be hinting at something more than professional courtesy. Chapter 8. The Tournament of Masks. The final day of the tournament dawned bright and clear, the air buzzing with anticipation. The stands were packed, every seat filled with spectators eager to witness the culmination of the week-long spectacle. Rosamund, disguised as Robin, felt the weight of their expectations, the pressure of her secret, the uncertainty of her future. She had advanced to the final round, a feat that had astonished everyone, including herself. Her opponent was Sir Carol of Blackwood, the very man her father had promised her to in marriage. The irony was bitter, the stakes impossibly high. She had seen Sir Carol fight in the earlier rounds, his brutality and ruthlessness evident in every match. He was a formidable opponent, skilled with both sword and lance, his armor gleaming black, a symbol of his dark reputation. She knew he would show her no mercy, that he would relish the opportunity to defeat her, to humiliate her, to claim her as his prize. As she prepared for the final joust, Rosamund felt a sense of grim determination. She had come this far, had overcome so many obstacles, had proven herself to be more than just a lady in disguise. She would not be defeated, not by Sir Carol, not by anyone. She mounted Whisper, the mare sensing her rider's tension, nuzzling her shoulder reassuringly. Rosamund adjusted her helmet, the metal cool against her brow, her vision narrowed to the narrow slit that allowed her to see. She rode into the lists, the roar of the crowd washing over her like a tidal wave. She saw her father, seated in the royal box, his expression cold and expectant. She saw Sir Hugh, standing near the lists, his gaze fixed on her, his expression unreadable. She took her place opposite Sir Carol, the two combatants facing each other across the long, wooden barrier. The herald raised his trumpet, the sound echoing through the arena. "Knights, prepare yourselves," he boomed, "for the final joust of the tournament." On my signal, Rosamund lowered her lance, her grip tightening on the wooden shaft. She focused all her energy, all her will, on the task at hand. She had to win. She had to defeat Sir Carol. She had to escape the fate her father had planned for her. The trumpet sounded, a sharp, piercing blast. Rosamund spurred Whisper forward, the mare charging down the lists, her hooves thundering on the packed earth. Sir Carol charged towards her, his black armor gleaming in the sunlight, his lance aimed at her heart. The two riders collided with a deafening crash, the impact jarring Rosamund's entire body. She felt her lance splinter against Sir Carol's shield, but she held her seat, her body absorbing the shock. She had unhorsed him. Sir Carol crashed to the ground, his armor clattering against the wooden barrier. The crowd erupted in a frenzy of cheers and gasps of astonishment. Rosamund, still mounted, raised her broken lance in victory. She had done it. She had defeated Sir Carol. She had won the tournament. But her triumph was short-lived. As she turned Whisper to ride back towards the starting point, she saw Sir Carol rising to his feet, his face contorted with rage. He drew his sword, his eyes blazing with hatred. "You may have won the joust, woman," he snarled, his voice dripping with venom. "But you will not escape me. You are mine, by right of contract, by right of conquest." He lunged at her, his sword whistling through the air. Rosamund, caught off guard, barely managed to parry his blow. She was disoriented, exhausted from the joust, her defenses weakened. He pressed his attack, his strength and ferocity overwhelming her. She fought back, her skill and agility her only weapons, but she knew she was losing. He was too strong, too determined. She felt a sharp pain in her side, her armor pierced by his blade. She gasped, her vision blurring, her grip on her sword weakening. She stumbled, falling from Whisper's back, her body crashing to the ground. Sir Carol stood over her, his sword raised, a triumphant sneer on his face. "Now you will learn your place, Lady Rosamond," he said, his voice filled with malice. "You will be my wife, and you will obey me." Rosamond stared up at him, her heart filled with despair. She had failed. She had been defeated. She was about to be forced into a marriage she dreaded, a life of servitude and misery. But then, a figure stepped between them, a figure clad in shining armor, his sword drawn, his voice ringing with authority. "Stand down, Carol," Sir Hugh said, his voice cold and hard. "You will not harm her." Sir Carol hesitated, his eyes narrowing. "This is none of your concern, Fitzalan," he snarled. "She is my betrothed." "I have the right, you have no right," Sir Hugh interrupted, his voice rising in anger. "You have forfeited any claim to her by your dishonorable conduct. You have broken the rules of chivalry, the laws of the tournament. You are disgraced." He stepped closer, his sword pointed at Sir Carol's throat. "Leave this place, Carol," he said, "and never show your face in Whitmore again. Or you will face the consequences." Sir Carol, realizing he was outmatched, lowered his sword, his face pale with fear and resentment. He mumbled a curse and retreated, disappearing into the crowd. Sir Hugh turned to Rosamond, his expression softening. He knelt beside her, his hand gently touching her arm. "Are you hurt?" he asked, his voice filled with concern. She nodded, her hand clutching her side, where the blood was seeping through her armor. I think so," she whispered. He helped her to her feet, his arm supporting her, his presence reassuring. He looked at her, his eyes filled with a mixture of concern and something else. Something deeper, something she couldn't quite decipher. The crowd was silent, stunned by the sudden turn of events. They had witnessed a dramatic confrontation, a clash between two knights, a defense of a lady's honor. Rosamond's father stepped forward, his face a mask of fury. "What is the meaning of this, Fitzalan?" he demanded. "You have interfered in a private matter, a family affair. You have insulted a noble knight. I have upheld the law." "Lord Edmund," Sir Hugh interrupted, his voice firm and unwavering. "Sir Carol violated the rules of the tournament, attacked a defenseless opponent. He deserved to be punished. But the marriage contract," Lord Edmund stammered. "It is binding. It is legal." Sir Hugh looked at Rosamond, his eyes searching hers. "Is this what you want, Rosamond?" he asked, his voice soft, almost a whisper. "Do you wish to marry this man?" She shook her head, her eyes filled with tears. "No," she whispered. "I do not." Sir Hugh turned back to Lord Edmund, his expression resolute. "Then the contract is null and void," he said. "A forced marriage is no marriage at all. It is an abomination." Lord Edmund, realizing he had been defeated, stood speechless, his face red with anger and frustration. Sir Hugh turned back to Rosamond, his hand gently touching her cheek.
"Come," he said.
"Let's get you to safety. Let us tend to your wounds." He led her away from the lists, away from the crowd, away from her father's wrath. He led her towards the castle, towards a future that was uncertain, but filled with a glimmer of hope. A future where she might finally be free. It was a victory and a defeat, and the beginning of something entirely new, all wrapped together. Chapter 9. A dance of blades and secrets. The immediate aftermath of the tournament was a chaotic swirl of activity. Rosamond, her wound tended to by the castle healer, found herself the center of attention, a mixture of concern, admiration, and speculation swirling around her. Sir Hugh, having publicly defied her father and thwarted the arranged marriage, was hailed as a hero by some, a meddling outsider by others. Lord Edmund, humiliated and enraged, retreated to his chambers, refusing to speak to anyone. The court was abuzz with gossip, the whispers about Rosamund's true identity and Sir Hugh's intervention spreading like wildfire. Rosamund, despite her physical pain and emotional exhaustion, felt a sense of liberation. She had been freed from the forced marriage, had proven her skill and courage, had earned the respect of many. But she also knew that her situation was precarious. Her father was still her legal guardian, and he still held considerable power over her. Sir Hugh, aware of the delicate balance, remained at Whitmore, ostensibly as a guest, but in reality as Rosamund's protector. He kept a watchful eye on her, his presence a constant reassurance, but also a reminder of the complexities of their relationship. He treated her with a mixture of respect and something more. He was no longer the distant, unapproachable knight who had first discovered her secret. He was attentive, solicitous, his gaze lingering on her, his voice softening when he spoke to her. He also began to involve her in his activities, inviting her to join him on his morning rides, his practice sessions in the training yard, even his discussions with the castle guards about security measures. It was as if he were treating her as an equal, a comrade, a fellow warrior. One evening, as they were walking together in the castle gardens, the setting sun casting long shadows across the manicured lawns, Sir Hugh turned to her, his expression serious. "Rosamund," he said, his voice low, "we need to talk. About your future. About us." She looked at him, her heart pounding in her chest. She knew this conversation was inevitable, but she was still unprepared for it. She was drawn to him, attracted to his strength, his honor, his vulnerability. But she was also afraid. Afraid of her own feelings, afraid of the consequences of their forbidden connection. "What is there to talk about?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. "My father still hates me. I am still a woman in a man's world. Nothing has changed." "Everything has changed," he said, his voice firm. "You have proven yourself. You have earned your freedom. And I will not let him take it away from you." His words sent a shiver down her spine. He was offering her his protection, his support, but he was also hinting at something more. "But what about you?" she asked. "You have risked your own reputation, your own standing, by defying my father."
"Why?"
He hesitated, his gaze shifting to the distant horizon. "Because I believe in you, Rosamund," he said. "I see something in you that inspires me. Something that I have not felt in a long time." He paused, his eyes searching hers. "I've been living in darkness, Rosamund," he said, his voice barely audible. "Haunted by my past, by my failures. But you have brought light into my life. You've shown me that there is still hope, still beauty, still love." His words, so unexpected, so intense, took her breath away. She stared at him, her mind reeling, her heart overflowing with a mixture of emotions. He was confessing his feelings for her, feelings that she had dared not even dream of. I do not know what to say," she stammered. He reached out, his hand gently touching her cheek. "Say nothing," he said, his voice soft. "Just listen." He leaned closer, his eyes locking with hers. She felt his breath on her face, the warmth of his body radiating towards her. She knew what was about to happen, and she did not resist. He kissed her. It was a gentle kiss, a tentative exploration, a meeting of lips that sent a shockwave of electricity through her entire body. It was a kiss that spoke of longing, of desire, of a connection that had been building between them, unspoken, unacknowledged, until now. She responded to his kiss, her own lips parting, her arms reaching up to encircle his neck. She felt his body tremble against hers, his heartbeat mirroring her own. The kiss deepened, becoming more passionate, more urgent. It was a kiss that erased the boundaries between them, the differences in their rank, their gender, their pasts. It was a kiss that united them, two souls drawn together by a shared destiny. But the moment was fleeting. They broke apart, both of them breathing heavily, their eyes filled with a mixture of wonder and apprehension. "This is dangerous," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Yes," he agreed. "But it is also inevitable." He looked at her, his expression serious. "We cannot deny what is between us, Rosamund," he said. "But we must be careful. We must be discreet. Your father will not give up easily. and there are others who would seek to exploit our connection. She nodded, her mind racing. She knew he was right. Their love was forbidden, a secret that could destroy them both if it were revealed. But she also knew that she could not deny her feelings, that she could not turn away from the man who had captured her heart. "What do we do?"
she asked.
He took her hand, his grip firm and reassuring. "We continue as we have been," he said. "We train, we prepare, we wait. We bide our time until the opportunity arises to claim our freedom together." His words filled her with hope, with a sense of shared purpose. They were a team, a partnership, two warriors fighting for their love, for their future. They would continue their dance of blades and secrets, a dance of danger and desire, a dance that would ultimately determine their fate. The game of secrets had taken a new twist. Chapter 10. The King's Decree. The uneasy truce at Whitmore was shattered by the arrival of a royal messenger, bearing a sealed scroll emblazoned with the king's sigil. Lord Edmund, still smarting from his humiliation at the tournament, received the message with a mixture of apprehension and anticipation. He hoped, perhaps, for a summons to court, a chance to regain his standing, to redeem himself in the eyes of the king. But the message contained a surprise, a decree that would alter the course of events at Whitmore and throw Rosamund and Sir Hugh's carefully laid plans into disarray. The king, having heard of the unusual circumstances of the tournament, and intrigued by the reports of a woman warrior who had defeated seasoned knights, had issued a royal command. Rosamund, under the guise of Robin, was to be summoned to court, to present herself before the king and demonstrate her skills. The decree was accompanied by a personal letter from the king to Sir Hugh, praising his chivalry and his defense of Lady Rosamund, and requesting his presence at court as well, to act as her mentor and protector. Lord Edmund, initially furious at the prospect of Rosamund's deception being further exposed, was forced to comply with the king's command. He saw, perhaps, a glimmer of opportunity in the situation. If Rosamund impressed the king, if she proved her worth, it might restore his family's honor, might even lead to a more advantageous alliance. Rosamund, however, received the news with mixed emotions. She was excited by the prospect of proving herself before the king, of demonstrating her skills on a grander stage. But she was also terrified. She would be exposed, her true identity revealed to the entire court, and she would be separated from Sir Hugh, her protector, her confidant, her lover. Sir Hugh, ever pragmatic, saw the king's decree as both a challenge and an opportunity. He knew that Rosamund would face scrutiny, prejudice, perhaps even danger at court. But he also knew that it was a chance for her to gain recognition, to secure her freedom, to defy the constraints of her gender. He assured her that he would accompany her, that he would protect her, that he would stand by her side, no matter what. But he also warned her that they would have to be even more careful, more discreet. Their relationship, their secret love, would be under even greater scrutiny at court. The journey to the king's court was long and arduous. Rosamund, still disguised as Robin, rode alongside Sir Hugh, the two of them accompanied by a small retinue of guards. They traveled through forests and fields, across rivers and mountains, the landscape mirroring the emotional turmoil within them. Rosamund, despite her apprehension, found herself drawn closer to Sir Hugh. They shared stories, dreams, fears, their bond deepening with each passing day. They practiced their swordsmanship together, honing their skills, preparing for the challenges that lay ahead. They also shared stolen moments of intimacy, brief embraces, whispered words of affection, their love a fragile flame that flickered in the darkness of their deception. One evening, as they were camped by a river, the stars twinkling above them, Sir Hugh turned to her, his expression serious. "Rosamund," he said, his voice low, "I have been thinking about our future, about what we want." She looked at him, her heart pounding in her chest. She knew what he was about to say, and she was both excited and terrified. "I love you, Rosamund," he said, his voice filled with emotion. "I have never loved anyone like this before, and I want to spend my life with you." Tears welled up in her eyes, tears of joy, of relief, of overwhelming love. I love you too, Hugh, she whispered. More than anything. He reached out, his hand gently touching her cheek. But we cannot marry, he said, his voice tinged with regret. Not yet. Not until your father is no longer a threat. Not until you are truly free. She nodded, her heart aching with the bittersweet reality of their situation. Their love was forbidden, a secret that could destroy them both. But I have a plan, he said, his voice turning determined. A way for us to be together. A way for you to claim your rightful place. He explained his plan, a daring, audacious scheme that involved the king, the court, and a hidden truth about Rosamund's lineage, a truth that had been concealed from her for her entire life. It was a risky plan, a gamble that could either secure their future or lead to their downfall. But Rosamund, trusting Sir Hugh with her life, with her heart, agreed to it. They embraced, their bodies clinging together, their love a beacon of hope in the uncertain darkness. They knew that the challenges ahead would be great, that they would face opposition, betrayal, perhaps even death. But they were together, united in their love, in their determination, in their quest for freedom. The king's decree had set them on a new path, a path filled with danger and uncertainty, but also with the promise of a future where they could finally be together, openly, honestly, without fear. The journey had just begun, and there was a long road ahead. Chapter 11. Letters of Treachery. The arrival at the king's court was a spectacle of pomp and pageantry. Rosamund, still disguised as Robin, was awestruck by the sheer scale of the royal palace, the throngs of courtiers, the opulence and grandeur that surrounded her. She felt small, insignificant, a country girl lost in a sea of sophisticated nobles. Sir Hugh, however, was in his element. He was known and respected at court, his reputation as a valiant knight preceding him. He navigated the complex social landscape with ease, introducing Rosamund as Robin to influential figures, securing her an audience with the king, and subtly gathering information about the court's dynamics. He was also acutely aware of the dangers that lurked beneath the surface of courtly life. He knew that Rosamund's deception would be under constant scrutiny, that there were those who would seek to exploit her vulnerability, to use her for their own political gain. He kept a watchful eye on her, his presence a constant reassurance, but also a reminder of the precariousness of their situation. He warned her to be careful, to trust no one, to reveal nothing of her true identity or their relationship. Rosamund, despite her initial awe, quickly adapted to the courtly environment. She observed the interactions between the nobles, the subtle power plays, the veiled threats, the constant jockeying for position. She learned to read between the lines, to decipher the hidden meanings behind the flowery language, to navigate the treacherous currents of courtly intrigue. She also discovered that she was not the only one with secrets. The court was a breeding ground for conspiracies, betrayals, and hidden agendas. She overheard whispered conversations, intercepted coded messages, and witnessed clandestine meetings, all hinting at a web of intrigue that threatened to unravel the very fabric of the kingdom. One evening, while exploring the vast library of the palace, Rosamund stumbled upon a hidden chamber, a secret room filled with ancient scrolls and forgotten texts. It was here that she discovered a collection of letters that revealed a shocking truth about her own lineage, a truth that had been deliberately concealed from her for her entire life. The letters were written by her mother, addressed to a mysterious nobleman, a man who was clearly her mother's lover, and, Rosamund realized with a jolt of astonishment, her true father. The letters spoke of a forbidden love affair, a secret child, and a conspiracy to keep Rosamund's true parentage hidden, to protect her from the wrath of her supposed father, Lord Edmund, and to prevent a potentially devastating political scandal. Rosamund's true father, it turned out, was not some obscure nobleman, but a member of the royal family, a close relative of the king himself. This meant that Rosamund was not merely a noblewoman, but a princess, a potential heir to the throne. The discovery shook her to her core. It explained so much: her mother's secrecy, her father's coldness, her own sense of being different, of not belonging. It also explained Sir Hugh's plan, his daring scheme to reveal her true identity to the king and secure her rightful place. But the letters also revealed a darker truth. They spoke of a plot, a conspiracy orchestrated by Lord Edmund and a faction of ambitious nobles to eliminate Rosamond and claim the throne for themselves. This plot was still active, the conspirators still lurking in the shadows, waiting for their opportunity to strike. Rosamond, realizing the danger she was in, immediately sought out Sir Hugh. She showed him the letters, her hands trembling, her voice filled with a mixture of fear and excitement. He read the letters, his expression growing increasingly serious. He confirmed her suspicions, explaining that he had known about her true parentage for some time, that he had been gathering evidence, waiting for the right moment to reveal it to the king. "This changes everything, Rosamond," he said, his voice low. "It makes you even more of a target. But it also gives us a powerful weapon, the truth." They decided to act quickly. They would present the letters to the king, expose the conspiracy, and claim Rosamond's rightful place. But they knew that it would be a dangerous game, a battle against powerful enemies who would stop at nothing to silence them. The letters were not just a revelation, they were a call to arms. The secrets of her past were now the keys to her future. The carefully laid plans became a desperate race. Chapter 12. The Unveiling. The audience with the king was scheduled for the following morning. Rosamond, still disguised as Robin, stood beside Sir Hugh in the grand hall of the palace, her heart pounding with a mixture of anticipation and dread. The hall was filled with courtiers, nobles, and dignitaries, all eager to witness the presentation of the mystery knight who had captured the king's attention. King Alaric was a man of imposing stature, with a shrewd, penetrating gaze and an air of regal authority. He sat on his throne, surrounded by his advisors, his expression unreadable. Sir Hugh stepped forward, bowing low before the king. "Your Majesty," he said, his voice clear and resonant, "I present to you Robin of Whitmore, the victor of the recent tournament, a warrior of exceptional skill and courage." Rosamond, following Sir Hugh's lead, bowed deeply, keeping her head down, her helmet obscuring her face. She felt the weight of the king's gaze, the scrutiny of the entire court. "We have heard much of this Robin," the king said, his voice a deep rumble, "of his unusual abilities. We are eager to see them for ourselves." He gestured towards a training dummy that had been set up in the center of the hall. "Show us, Robin," he commanded. "Demonstrate your skills." Rosamond, drawing her sword, stepped forward. She performed a series of maneuvers, her movements fluid and precise, her blade whistling through the air. She attacked the dummy with a ferocity that surprised even herself, her years of training, her pent-up frustration, her burning desire for freedom, all channeled into her performance. The court watched in silence, impressed by her skill, her agility, her power. Even the king seemed impressed, a flicker of surprise in his eyes. When she had finished, she sheathed her sword, bowing once again before the king. "Thank you, Robin," the king said. "You are indeed a skilled warrior. But we have heard other reports. Reports that suggest you are not who you appear to be." Rosamond's heart leaped into her throat. She knew this moment was coming, the moment of truth, the moment of revelation. Sir Hugh stepped forward, his expression resolute. "Your Majesty," he said, "there is indeed more to Robin's story than meets the eye. A story that involves secrets, betrayal, and a hidden truth that has been concealed for far too long." He paused, his gaze shifting to Rosamond. "With your permission, Your Majesty," he said, "I would like to reveal Robin's true identity." The king nodded, his eyes narrowed.
"Proceed," he said.
Sir Hugh turned to Rosamond, his hand gently touching her arm. "Rosamond," he said, his voice soft, yet audible to the entire court, "it is time. Remove your helmet." Rosamond hesitated, her hand trembling as she reached for the helmet. She felt a surge of fear, of vulnerability, but also a sense of liberation, of finally shedding the disguise that had hidden her true self for so long. She took a deep breath and removed the helmet. Her auburn hair cascaded down her shoulders, framing her face, revealing her delicate features, her striking blue eyes. A gasp went up from the court, a collective intake of breath as the truth was revealed. Robin was a woman. Rosamund, no longer hiding, lifted her chin, her gaze meeting the king's. She saw a mixture of shock, disbelief, and something else, recognition. Sir Hugh stepped forward, holding out the letters Rosamund had discovered in the library, the letters that revealed her true parentage. "Your Majesty," he said, "these letters, written by Lady Eleanor of Whitmore, reveal a shocking truth. A truth that has been deliberately concealed for 18 years. A truth that concerns the lineage of Lady Rosamund." He paused, his voice filled with emotion. "Lady Rosamund is not the daughter of Lord Edmund," he said. "She is the daughter of your late brother, Prince Edward. She is your niece, Your Majesty, and a rightful heir to the throne." The revelation sent a shockwave through the court. The nobles gasped, the courtiers whispered, the king stared at Rosamund, his expression a mixture of astonishment and, could it be, relief. He stood up, his voice trembling slightly. "Is this true?" he asked, his gaze fixed on Rosamund. "Are you Eleanor's child?" Rosamund nodded, her eyes filled with tears. "Yes, Your Majesty," she whispered. "I am." The king approached her, his hand reaching out to touch her face, a gesture of disbelief, of recognition. He saw the resemblance to his late brother, the familiar features, the striking blue eyes. "It is true," he said, his voice filled with emotion. "You are family." He turned to the court, his voice regaining its regal authority. "Let it be known," he proclaimed, "that Lady Rosamund of Whitmore is, in truth, Princess Rosamund, daughter of Prince Edward, and a rightful heir to the throne of this kingdom." The court erupted in a cacophony of cheers, gasps, and whispered conversations. Rosamund, standing beside Sir Hugh, felt a surge of triumph, of vindication, of finally claiming her rightful place. But she also knew that the battle was far from over. Lord Edmund, and the faction of nobles who had conspired to eliminate her, would not give up easily. They would fight to protect their power, their ambitions, even if it meant defying the king himself. The truth was revealed, the applause deafening, but the danger remained. Chapter 13. A bargain struck. The revelation of Rosamund's true identity sent ripples of shock and intrigue throughout the court. While many rejoiced at the discovery of a lost princess, others, particularly those aligned with Lord Edmund, saw it as a threat to their own power and ambitions. Lord Edmund, who had been present at the unveiling, was visibly shaken. His carefully constructed facade of control crumbled, revealing the fear and desperation beneath. He had been exposed, his conspiracy revealed, his plans to seize the throne thwarted. He attempted to deny the accusations, to discredit the letters, to claim that it was all a fabrication, a plot by Sir Hugh to usurp his position. But the evidence was overwhelming, the king's recognition of Rosamund irrefutable. King Alaric, while welcoming his newfound niece, was also a shrewd and pragmatic ruler. He knew that Rosamund's claim to the throne, while legitimate, would be contested by powerful factions within the kingdom. He needed to consolidate her position, to secure her safety, and to prevent a civil war. He summoned Rosamund and Sir Hugh to a private audience, along with Lord Edmund and a handful of his most trusted advisors. The meeting was tense, the atmosphere thick with unspoken threats and accusations. "Rosamund," the king said, his voice firm but kind, "I acknowledge your claim to the throne. But you must understand, the path ahead will be fraught with danger. There are those who will oppose you, who will seek to remove you." Rosamund nodded, her expression resolute. "I understand, Your Majesty," she said. "I am prepared to fight for my right, for my kingdom." The king turned to Lord Edmund, his gaze hardening. "Edmund," he said, his voice cold and unforgiving, "you have betrayed my trust, conspired against my family, and attempted to usurp the throne. You deserve the harshest punishment." Lord Edmund, realizing his desperate situation, fell to his knees, begging for mercy. "Your Majesty," he pleaded, "I was misled, manipulated. I acted out of misguided loyalty. I beg you, spare my life." The king considered his plea, his expression unreadable. He knew that executing Lord Edmund, while justified, would likely spark a rebellion among his supporters. He needed to find a way to neutralize the threat, to secure Rosamund's position without plunging the kingdom into chaos. He turned to Sir Hugh, his gaze assessing. "Sir Hugh," he said, "you have played a crucial role in revealing this conspiracy. You have shown loyalty to the crown and to Rosamund. What is your counsel?" Sir Hugh stepped forward, his expression calm and composed. "Your Majesty," he said, "I believe that justice must be served, but also mercy. Executing Lord Edmund would only create a martyr, a symbol of resistance. I propose a different course of action." He outlined his proposal, a daring plan that involved a bargain, a compromise that would satisfy both justice and political expediency. He proposed that Lord Edmund be stripped of his titles, his lands, and his wealth, but that his life be spared. In exchange, he would swear an oath of fealty to Rosamund, recognizing her as the rightful heir to the throne and pledging his support to her reign. Furthermore, he proposed that Rosamund, to solidify her position and unite the kingdom, be betrothed to a powerful and loyal nobleman, a man who could provide her with the military strength and political support she needed. The king listened intently, his advisors murmuring their agreement. It was a bold plan, but it was also a shrewd one. It would neutralize the threat posed by Lord Edmund, secure Rosamund's position, and prevent a potentially devastating civil war. But there was one crucial detail, one unspoken question that hung in the air. Who would be Rosamund's betrothed? The king turned to Rosamund, his gaze questioning. "Rosamund," he said, "what are your thoughts? Are you willing to accept this bargain?" Rosamund hesitated, her heart torn. She had just been reunited with her true family, had claimed her rightful place, but she was now being asked to sacrifice her personal happiness, her love for Sir Hugh, for the sake of the kingdom. She looked at him. Their silent exchange contained a world of emotions. She took a deep breath, her expression hardening. "I am willing, Your Majesty," she said, her voice clear and steady. "For the good of the kingdom, I will accept this bargain." The king nodded, his expression relieved. "Very well," he said. "Then it is settled." He turned to Lord Edmund, his gaze unwavering. "Edmund," he said, "do you accept these terms? Do you swear fealty to Princess Rosamund and pledge your support to her reign?" Lord Edmund, defeated and desperate, bowed his head. "I do, Your Majesty," he mumbled. "I swear." The bargain was struck, the agreement sealed. But the unspoken question remained. Who would be Rosamund's betrothed? The king, with a subtle smile, provided the answer. "There is one nobleman," he said, "who has proven his loyalty, his courage, and his devotion to Rosamund. A man who has risked his own life to protect her, to reveal the truth, to secure her rightful place." He paused, his gaze shifting to Sir Hugh. "Sir Hugh Fitzalan," he said, his voice filled with authority, "I hereby offer you the hand of Princess Rosamund in marriage. Do you accept?" Sir Hugh stepped forward, his expression a mixture of surprise and elation. He looked at Rosamund, his eyes filled with love, with gratitude, with a profound sense of destiny fulfilled. "I do, Your Majesty," he said, his voice clear and strong. "With all my heart, I do." Rosamund, her heart overflowing with joy, smiled at him, her eyes shining with tears. The bargain had been struck, the sacrifice made, but in the end, love had triumphed. She would be queen, but she would also be with the man she loved. It was a fairy tale twist, hard-won but real. Chapter 14. The Road to War. The betrothal of Rosamund and Sir Hugh, while celebrated by many, was not universally welcomed. The remnants of Lord Edmund's faction, though weakened, remained a threat, their resentment simmering beneath the surface of courtly life. They saw the marriage as a further consolidation of Rosamund's power, a threat to their own ambitions, and they began to plot, to conspire, to find a way to undermine the union, to reclaim their lost influence. Rosamund and Sir Hugh, aware of the dangers that lurked in the shadows, began to prepare, to consolidate their own support, to gather allies, to strengthen the kingdom's defenses. They knew that a conflict was inevitable, that the disgruntled nobles would not give up easily, that they would likely resort to violence to achieve their goals. Sir Hugh, with his military experience and his reputation as a valiant knight, took charge of the kingdom's defenses. He began to train new recruits, to fortify castles, to stockpile weapons and supplies, to prepare for war. He also reached out to loyal lords and knights, forging alliances, securing their support, building a coalition that could withstand the inevitable challenge. Rosamund, despite her lack of military experience, proved to be a valuable asset. She possessed a keen intellect, a sharp understanding of courtly intrigue, and a natural ability to inspire loyalty and devotion. She used her position as princess to rally support, to negotiate with wavering nobles, to uncover plots and conspiracies, to strengthen the kingdom from within. She also continued her own training, honing her swordsmanship skills, learning the art of strategy and tactics, preparing herself for the possibility of taking to the battlefield alongside Sir Hugh. She was determined to be more than just a figurehead, to be a true warrior princess, a leader who could inspire her people and defend her kingdom. One evening, as they were reviewing maps and discussing strategy in the war room of the palace, Sir Hugh turned to Rosamund, his expression serious. "Rosamund," he said, his voice low, "we must be prepared for anything. This conflict, it will not be easy. There will be bloodshed, there will be loss, there will be sacrifice." She nodded, her expression resolute. "I understand, Hugh," she said. "I am not afraid. I am ready to fight, to defend our kingdom, to protect our future." He reached out, his hand gently touching her cheek. "I know you are," he said, his voice filled with love and admiration. "You are the strongest, bravest woman I have ever known, and I am proud to stand by your side." They embraced, their bodies clinging together, their love a source of strength, of comfort, of hope in the face of the impending storm. But their preparations were not limited to military matters. They also sought to uncover the deeper roots of the conspiracy, to identify the key players, to understand their motives, to find a way to neutralize them before they could strike. Rosamund, using her network of informants, discovered that the disgruntled nobles were being supported by a foreign power, a neighboring kingdom that saw the instability in Rosamund's realm as an opportunity to expand its own influence, to conquer and annex her territory. This discovery changed the nature of the conflict. It was no longer just an internal power struggle, but a war for survival, a battle against a foreign invader who threatened to destroy everything Rosamund and Sir Hugh held dear. They knew that they had to act quickly, to strike before the enemy could fully mobilize, to expose the conspiracy, to rally their people to defend their kingdom. They decided to launch a preemptive strike, a daring raid on the enemy's staging grounds, a move that would disrupt their plans, weaken their forces, and send a message that Rosamund's kingdom was not to be trifled with. It was a risky plan, a gamble that could either secure their victory or lead to their defeat. But they were willing to take the risk, to fight for their love, for their kingdom, for their future. The storm clouds of war were gathering, the battle lines were drawn, and Rosamund and Sir Hugh were ready to face the challenge, together. This was not going to be a fight they could avoid. It was coming for them. Chapter 15. Blood and Steel. The preemptive strike was planned with meticulous care, every detail scrutinized, every contingency considered. Rosamund, though still relatively inexperienced in warfare, proved to be a valuable strategist, her keen intellect and her understanding of courtly intrigue providing insights that Sir Hugh, with his more traditional military background, might have overlooked. They chose a small, elite force of knights and soldiers, men known for their loyalty, their skill, and their courage. They would travel under cover of darkness, infiltrate the enemy's staging grounds, and strike swiftly and decisively, disrupting their preparations and sowing chaos among their ranks. Rosamund insisted on accompanying the raiding party, arguing that her presence would inspire the troops and demonstrate her commitment to the defense of her kingdom. Sir Hugh, initially reluctant to expose her to such danger, eventually relented, recognizing the validity of her argument and admiring her unwavering determination. The night of the raid was dark and moonless, the perfect conditions for their clandestine operation. Rosamund, dressed in her familiar leather armor, her sword strapped to her side, felt a mixture of fear and exhilaration. She was a warrior, a princess, a leader, and she was ready to face the challenge, to fight for her kingdom, to stand by Sir Hugh's side. They rode through the night, their movements silent and stealthy, their senses alert to any sign of danger. They reached the enemy's staging grounds just before dawn, the camp still shrouded in darkness, the soldiers asleep in their tents. The attack was swift and brutal. Rosamund and Sir Hugh led the charge, their swords flashing in the darkness, their war cries echoing through the camp. The enemy soldiers, caught completely by surprise, were slow to react, their defenses disorganized, their resistance feeble. Rosamund fought with a ferocity that surprised even herself. She had trained for years, honing her skills, preparing for this moment. But training was one thing, actual combat was another. The reality of blood and steel, the screams of the wounded, the smell of death, was a harsh awakening. She saw men fall, both friend and foe, their lives extinguished in an instant. She felt the sting of minor wounds, the bruises of close calls, the exhaustion of relentless fighting. But she did not falter. She fought on, driven by her determination to protect her kingdom, to secure her future, to stand by the man she loved. Sir Hugh, fighting beside her, was a whirlwind of destruction, his sword a blur of motion, his strength and skill unmatched. He protected her, guided her, inspired her, his presence a constant reassurance in the chaos of battle. The raid was a success. The enemy's staging grounds were destroyed, their supplies burned, their soldiers scattered. The threat of an immediate invasion had been averted, at least for the time being. But the victory came at a cost. Several of their own men had been killed, others wounded, their sacrifices a stark reminder of the brutal reality of war. Rosamund, tending to the wounded, felt a profound sense of grief, of responsibility, of the heavy burden that came with leadership. As the sun rose, casting a bloody glow over the ravaged camp, Rosamund and Sir Hugh stood together, surveying the aftermath of the battle. They were exhausted, bruised, and bloodied, but they were also triumphant. They had won a significant victory, a victory that would buy them time, strengthen their position, and send a message to their enemies that they would not be easily defeated. "We did it, Hugh," Rosamund said, her voice hoarse but filled with pride. "We did it." He looked at her, his eyes filled with love and admiration. "Yes, we did," he said. "Together." He reached out, his hand gently touching her cheek, wiping away a streak of blood. "You were magnificent, Rosamund," he said. "A true warrior princess." She smiled, her heart swelling with emotion. She had proven herself, not just as a warrior, but as a leader, as a woman who could stand alongside men in battle and fight for her kingdom. The road ahead was still long and uncertain, the war far from over. But they had taken a significant step, a step towards securing their future, towards building a kingdom where they could finally be together, openly, honestly, without fear. The blood spilled was a testament to their commitment, a grim reminder of the price of freedom. Chapter 16. Echoes of a Lost Love. The victory at the staging grounds, while significant, did not end the war. The foreign power supporting the rebellious nobles, stung by the unexpected attack, retaliated by sending a larger force across the border, launching a full-scale invasion of Rosamund's kingdom. The war became a protracted, brutal conflict, a series of sieges, skirmishes, and pitched battles that tested the strength and resilience of Rosamund's forces. She and Sir Hugh fought side by side, leading their troops, inspiring their people, and defending their land against the relentless onslaught. Rosamund, despite her initial inexperience, proved to be a natural leader on the battlefield. She was courageous, resourceful, and compassionate, earning the respect and loyalty of her soldiers. She also demonstrated a keen understanding of strategy and tactics, often surprising her enemies with her unorthodox maneuvers and her ability to anticipate their moves. Sir Hugh, as always, was her rock, her protector, her guide. He was a formidable warrior, a skilled commander, and a source of unwavering strength and support. He taught her, protected her, and fought alongside her, their bond deepening with each shared battle, each shared victory, each shared loss. But the war took its toll. The constant fighting, the endless sieges, the relentless pressure from the enemy, began to wear them down. They were exhausted, both physically and emotionally, their bodies bruised and battered, their spirits tested to the limit. One evening, after a particularly brutal battle that had resulted in heavy losses on both sides, Rosamund and Sir Hugh found themselves alone in their tent, seeking a brief respite from the horrors of war. Rosamund, tending to a wound on Sir Hugh's arm, noticed a small, faded scar just above his wrist, a scar she had never seen before. "What is this, Hugh?" she asked, her voice soft, her fingers gently tracing the outline of the scar. He hesitated, his gaze shifting away from her, his expression turning distant, almost haunted. "It is an old wound," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "From a long time ago." She sensed a hidden story, a past sorrow that he had never shared with her. She knew he had lost a beloved horse in battle, but this felt different, deeper, more personal. "Tell me," she said, her voice gentle but insistent. "I want to know. I want to understand." He hesitated again, his eyes searching hers, as if weighing the risks of revealing his vulnerability, of sharing a pain that he had kept buried for so long. Finally, he spoke, his voice low and filled with a mixture of regret and longing. "It was before I came to Whitmore," he said. "Before I met you, I was betrothed to a woman named Lyra." Rosamund's heart skipped a beat. She had never known he had been betrothed, that he had loved another woman before her. A pang of jealousy, of insecurity, shot through her, but she quickly suppressed it, knowing that she had no right to feel that way. "What happened?" she asked, her voice barely audible. He sighed, his gaze drifting to the flickering flames of the campfire. "She was killed," he said, his voice flat, devoid of emotion. "By bandits. On her way to our wedding." Rosamund felt a surge of sympathy for him, a wave of understanding for the pain he had endured, the loss he had suffered. "I am so sorry, Hugh," she whispered, her hand reaching out to touch his. He nodded, his expression still guarded. "It was a long time ago," he said. "But some wounds never fully heal." He explained how Lyra had given him a small, silver bracelet as a token of her love, a bracelet he had always worn, a reminder of their bond. During the attack, the bracelet had been damaged, cutting into his wrist, leaving the scar that Rosamund had now discovered. "I kept the bracelet," he said, his voice trembling slightly. "Even though it was broken. Even though it reminded me of her, of my failure to protect her." Rosamund understood. She understood the pain of loss, the burden of guilt, the enduring power of memory. She had lost her mother, had carried the weight of her secret identity for so long, had felt the sting of betrayal and the fear of exposure. She reached out, her hand gently covering his, their fingers intertwining. "You were not to blame, Hugh," she said, her voice filled with compassion. "You could not have prevented it. It was fate." He looked at her, his eyes filled with a mixture of gratitude and something else, a flicker of hope, of healing, of a love that was slowly replacing the pain of the past. "Thank you, Rosamund," he said, his voice soft. "For understanding. For loving me." He leaned closer, his lips meeting hers in a tender kiss, a kiss that spoke of shared sorrow, of shared healing, of a love that was stronger than any loss, any pain, any memory. The echoes of his lost love still lingered, but they were fading, replaced by the vibrant reality of his love for Rosamund, a love that was blossoming even in the midst of war, a love that was their strength, their hope, their future. The shared pain brought them closer, and his admission was another thread tying them together. Chapter 17. The Lioness Uncaged. The war raged on, the tide turning back and forth, neither side able to gain a decisive advantage. Rosamund and Sir Hugh continued to fight, to lead, to inspire, their bond strengthening with each shared challenge, each shared victory, each shared loss. Rosamund, growing in confidence and experience, began to take on a more prominent role in the war effort. She was no longer just a warrior princess, but a strategist, a diplomat, a leader in her own right. She rallied the troops, negotiated with wavering allies, and even devised a daring plan to infiltrate the enemy's capital and assassinate their king, a plan that Sir Hugh, though initially skeptical, eventually agreed to support. The plan was incredibly risky, a suicide mission that could easily end in their capture and death. But Rosamund was convinced that it was the only way to end the war quickly, to prevent further bloodshed, to secure a lasting peace. She insisted on leading the mission herself, arguing that her royal status, her knowledge of courtly intrigue, and her disguise skills gave her the best chance of success. Sir Hugh, torn between his desire to protect her and his respect for her judgment, reluctantly agreed, but insisted on accompanying her, on being by her side every step of the way. They assembled a small team of trusted companions, knights and soldiers who were skilled in stealth, combat, and espionage. They prepared meticulously, gathering intelligence, studying maps, practicing their infiltration techniques, leaving nothing to chance. The night of the mission was tense and fraught with danger. Rosamund, disguised as a foreign dignitary, and Sir Hugh, posing as her bodyguard, infiltrated the enemy capital, navigating the treacherous streets, avoiding detection, and making their way towards the royal palace. They faced numerous obstacles, close calls, and moments of heart-stopping suspense. They had to bribe guards, outwit spies, and even engage in brief but brutal skirmishes with enemy patrols. But they persevered, their determination fueled by their love for each other, their commitment to their kingdom, and their belief in their mission. They reached the palace, infiltrated its defenses, and made their way towards the king's chambers. Rosamund, using her knowledge of courtly protocol and her disguise skills, managed to bypass the guards, gain access to the king's private quarters, and confront him in his own bedchamber. The king, a cruel and ambitious man who had orchestrated the invasion of Rosamund's kingdom, was caught completely by surprise. He stared at her in disbelief, his eyes widening in fear as he recognized the woman who had dared to challenge him, the woman who had come to end his reign. Rosamund, her sword drawn, her expression resolute, confronted him with his crimes, his treachery, his responsibility for the bloodshed and suffering that had engulfed both their kingdoms. He attempted to deny the accusations, to plead for his life, to offer her bribes, but she was unmoved. She had come too far, had risked too much, had witnessed too much suffering to be swayed by his empty promises. She raised her sword, her hand trembling slightly, not with fear, but with the weight of the decision she was about to make. She was about to take a life, to commit an act of violence that would forever change her, but she knew it was necessary, that it was the only way to end the war, to secure peace, to protect her kingdom. But before she could strike, Sir Hugh intervened. He stepped between her and the king, his own sword drawn, his expression calm but firm. "Rosamund," he said, his voice low but clear, "this is not the way. We cannot stoop to his level. We cannot win this war by resorting to assassination, to treachery.
We must be better than that."
Rosamund hesitated, her sword wavering, her mind torn between her desire for revenge and her commitment to honor, to justice. She looked at Sir Hugh, his eyes filled with compassion, with understanding, with a deep belief in the power of righteousness. She lowered her sword, her body trembling with the release of tension, with the realization that he was right. Killing the king in cold blood would not end the war. It would only perpetuate the cycle of violence, of hatred, of revenge. They spared the king's life, but they took him prisoner, bringing him back to their own kingdom as a hostage, a bargaining chip to negotiate a lasting peace. The capture of the enemy king was a turning point in the war. It demoralized their forces, disrupted their leadership, and forced them to the negotiating table. Rosamund, with Sir Hugh by her side, negotiated a favorable peace treaty, securing her kingdom's borders, gaining reparations for the damages caused by the invasion, and establishing a lasting alliance with their former enemies. The war was over. Rosamund had proven herself, not just as a warrior, but as a leader, a diplomat, a queen. She had been uncaged, her spirit unleashed, her potential realized. She was the lioness, the protector of her kingdom, the embodiment of courage, justice, and compassion. The assassination attempt had been a test, and they had passed. Chapter 18. Scars of Loyalty. With the war concluded and a fragile peace established, Rosamund and Sir Hugh returned to her kingdom, hailed as heroes, their names celebrated throughout the land. They had faced death, endured hardship, and overcome seemingly insurmountable odds, their love and loyalty to each other, and their kingdom their guiding stars. But the scars of war, both visible and invisible, remained. Rosamund, though triumphant, carried the weight of the lives lost, the suffering endured, the decisions made. She had seen the brutality of battle, the fragility of life, the enduring power of both hatred and love. Sir Hugh, too, bore the marks of conflict. He had physical wounds, scars that served as reminders of the battles fought, the sacrifices made. But he also carried emotional scars, the memories of past losses, the burden of leadership, the constant awareness of the dangers that still lurked in the shadows. They sought to heal, both themselves and their kingdom. They worked tirelessly to rebuild shattered lives, to restore ravaged lands, to foster reconciliation and understanding among their people. They established hospitals, orphanages, and schools, seeking to create a society that was not only strong and prosperous, but also just and compassionate. Rosamund, drawing on her own experiences, became a champion of women's rights, advocating for their education, their empowerment, and their participation in all aspects of society. She challenged the traditional patriarchal norms, breaking down barriers and inspiring other women to follow in her footsteps. Sir Hugh, recognizing the importance of Rosamund's vision, supported her efforts, using his influence and his position to promote equality and justice. He also focused on strengthening the kingdom's defenses, ensuring that they would be prepared for any future threats, that the peace they had fought so hard to achieve would endure. One evening, as they were walking together in the castle gardens, the scent of roses filling the air, the setting sun casting a golden glow over the landscape, Rosamund turned to Sir Hugh, her expression thoughtful. "Hugh," she said, her voice soft, "do you ever regret it? All of it? The fighting, the sacrifices, the risks we took?" He looked at her, his eyes filled with love and understanding. "Never, Rosamund," he said, his voice firm. "Not for a moment. It was all worth it. For you. For our kingdom. For our future." She smiled, her heart swelling with emotion. She knew he was telling the truth. They had faced unimaginable challenges, had endured incredible hardships, but they had done it together, their love a constant source of strength, of hope, of inspiration. But there was one lingering issue, one unresolved conflict that still cast a shadow over their happiness. Lord Edmund, though stripped of his titles and wealth, remained a threat, his resentment simmering, his desire for revenge undiminished. He had been banished from the court, confined to a remote estate, but he continued to plot, to conspire, to seek ways to undermine Rosamund's reign, to reclaim his lost power. Rosamund and Sir Hugh were aware of his activities, their network of informants keeping them apprised of his movements, his contacts, his plans. They knew that he was a danger, a viper waiting to strike, and they were constantly vigilant, always prepared for his next move. One day, a messenger arrived, bearing a sealed letter addressed to Rosamund. The letter was from Lord Edmund, requesting a private meeting, a chance to reconcile, to offer his apologies, to pledge his loyalty. Rosamund was immediately suspicious. She knew that Lord Edmund was incapable of genuine remorse, that his offer was likely a trap, a ploy to lure her into a vulnerable position. Sir Hugh, sharing her suspicions, urged her to refuse the meeting, to ignore the letter, to have Lord Edmund arrested and imprisoned. But Rosamund, despite her misgivings, felt a strange compulsion to meet with him, to confront him one last time, to understand his motives, to perhaps find a way to end the cycle of hatred and betrayal that had plagued their family for so long. She decided to accept the meeting, but she would not go alone. She would take Sir Hugh and a detachment of guards with her, ensuring her safety and preventing any treachery. The meeting was arranged to take place in a neutral location, an ancient ruin on the outskirts of the kingdom, a place steeped in history and shadowed by the ghosts of the past. As they approached the ruin, Rosamund felt a sense of foreboding, a premonition of danger. The air was thick with tension, the silence broken only by the rustling of leaves and the distant cawing of crows. They entered the ruin, their swords drawn, their senses alert. Lord Edmund was waiting for them, alone, his expression a mixture of defiance and desperation. The confrontation was inevitable, the culmination of years of hatred, betrayal, and ambition. The scars of the past, both literal and metaphorical, were about to be reopened. The final scene was playing. Chapter 19. A Kingdom's Fate. The ancient ruin, once a grand hall, now lay in crumbling decay, a fitting backdrop for the final confrontation between Rosamund and Lord Edmund. The air was heavy with the scent of damp stone and the weight of unspoken accusations. "Rosamund," Lord Edmund said, his voice raspy, his eyes filled with a mixture of resentment and something else regret. "I asked you to come here to apologize." Rosamund, standing beside Sir Hugh, her sword drawn, her expression wary, remained silent. She did not believe him, did not trust him, but she was willing to hear him out, to understand his motives, to perhaps find a way to end the cycle of hatred and betrayal. "I know I have wronged you," he continued, his voice trembling slightly. "I have wronged your mother. I have wronged the kingdom. But I was not myself. I was driven by ambition, by fear, by lies." He explained how he had been manipulated, misled by the foreign power that had sought to destabilize Rosamund's kingdom, how he had been promised the throne in exchange for his cooperation, how he had been blinded by his own greed and his desire for power. "I was a fool, Rosamund," he said, his voice breaking. "A blind, foolish old man. I have lost everything. My titles, my lands, my wealth, my honor. And now I am losing my life." He revealed that he was suffering from a terminal illness, that he had only a few months to live, that he had come to this meeting not to seek revenge, but to seek forgiveness. Rosamund, listening to his confession, felt a flicker of pity for the man who had been her tormentor, her enemy, the man who had sought to destroy her. She saw the pain in his eyes, the desperation in his voice, the shadow of death that hung over him. But she also remembered the suffering he had caused, the lives he had ruined, the kingdom he had nearly destroyed. She could not easily forgive him, could not simply erase the past, could not forget the betrayal and the pain. Sir Hugh, sensing her inner conflict, stepped forward, his voice firm but compassionate. "Lord Edmund," he said, "your crimes are many, your sins are great. You deserve to be punished, to face the consequences of your actions. But," he continued, "we are not like you. We do not seek revenge. We do not believe in perpetuating the cycle of hatred and violence. We believe in justice, yes, but also in mercy." He turned to Rosamund, his eyes searching hers, seeking her approval, her understanding. Rosamund, her heart torn between her desire for justice and her capacity for compassion, nodded slowly. "I cannot forgive you, Lord Edmund," she said, her voice trembling. "Not yet. But I will not seek your death. I will allow you to live out your remaining days in peace as long as you swear an oath, a sacred oath, to never again interfere in the affairs of the kingdom, to never again plot against me or my family." Lord Edmund, tears streaming down his face, fell to his knees, his body shaking with emotion. "I swear, Rosamund," he whispered, his voice hoarse. "I swear on my life, on my honor, on everything I hold sacred. I will never harm you again. I will never betray you again." He swore the oath, his words echoing through the ancient ruin, a solemn pledge that sealed his fate and, perhaps, offered a glimmer of redemption. Rosamund and Sir Hugh, satisfied that he was sincere, sheathed their swords, their hearts heavy with the weight of the encounter, the burden of forgiveness, the enduring power of both hatred and love. They left the ruin, leaving Lord Edmund alone with his regrets, his impending death, and the faint hope of redemption. As they rode back towards the castle, Rosamund turned to Sir Hugh, her eyes filled with gratitude. "Thank you, Hugh," she said, her voice soft.
For stopping me.
"For showing me a better way." He smiled, his hand reaching out to touch hers. "We are in this together, Rosamund," he said. "Always. We will build a better kingdom, a just kingdom, a kingdom where mercy and compassion triumph over hatred and revenge." The fate of the kingdom, once hanging in the balance, now seemed secure. The war was over, the conspiracy crushed, the betrayer humbled. Rosamund and Sir Hugh, their love and loyalty tested and proven, were ready to rule, to lead, to build a future where peace, justice, and love would reign supreme. The weight was lifted, and forgiveness replaced vengeance. Chapter 20. The Dawn of Redemption. The years that followed were a time of peace, prosperity, and healing for Rosamund's kingdom. She and Sir Hugh, now king and queen, ruled with wisdom, compassion, and a firm commitment to justice. They implemented reforms, fostered trade, encouraged the arts and sciences, and created a society where all citizens, regardless of their gender, social status, or origin, had the opportunity to thrive. Rosamund, drawing on her own experiences, became a champion of the marginalized, the oppressed, the forgotten. She established schools for girls, hospitals for the poor, and shelters for the homeless, seeking to create a kingdom where everyone had a voice, where everyone mattered. Sir Hugh, ever her loyal partner and advisor, supported her efforts, using his military expertise to maintain peace and security, his political acumen to navigate the complex web of alliances and rivalries, and his unwavering love to sustain and inspire her. They also worked to heal the wounds of the past, to reconcile with their former enemies, to build bridges of understanding and cooperation. They reached out to the neighboring kingdom that had supported the rebellion, offering them friendship, trade, and mutual respect, transforming a former adversary into a valuable ally. Lord Edmund, true to his oath, remained secluded on his remote estate, living out his final days in quiet contemplation, reflecting on his past mistakes, and seeking, perhaps, a measure of redemption. Rosamund, though she could never fully forgive him, occasionally sent him messages, offering him words of comfort and understanding, demonstrating a capacity for compassion that even surprised herself. As the years passed, Rosamund and Sir Hugh were blessed with children, heirs to the throne who would carry on their legacy of justice, compassion, and peace. They raised their children to be strong, courageous, and kind, instilling in them the values that had guided their own lives, the values that had transformed a kingdom. One evening, as Rosamund and Sir Hugh, now older, their hair streaked with silver, their faces etched with the wisdom of years, stood together on the balcony of their castle, overlooking their prosperous and peaceful kingdom, they reflected on their journey, their struggles, their triumphs, their enduring love. "We did it, Hugh," Rosamund said, her voice soft, her hand reaching out to touch his. "We built a better world." He smiled, his eyes filled with love and admiration. "We did it together, Rosamund," he said. "And it was all worth it. Every sacrifice, every challenge, every tear." They embraced, their bodies clinging together, their love a beacon of hope, a testament to the power of human connection, a symbol of the enduring triumph of good over evil. The dawn of redemption had arrived, not just for their kingdom, but for themselves. They had overcome adversity, had healed old wounds, had found forgiveness and love, and had created a legacy that would endure for generations to come. Their story, a tale of courage, betrayal, sacrifice, and love, would be told and retold, inspiring future generations to strive for a better world, a world where justice, compassion, and peace would reign supreme. The scars remained, a reminder of the battles fought, the losses endured, but they were also a symbol of resilience, of healing, of the enduring power of the human spirit. Rosamund, the warrior princess, the lioness uncaged, had found her true destiny, her true love, her true kingdom, and she had ruled it with wisdom, grace, and unwavering determination. And Sir Hugh, her champion, stood at her side, a final resolution of all the forces that pulled them apart. Epilogue. The tapestry depicting the life of Queen Rosamund and King Hugh hung in the grand hall of the castle, a vibrant testament to their extraordinary reign. Generations had passed, but the legend of the warrior princess and her valiant knight endured, woven into the very fabric of the kingdom's history. The tapestry showed Rosamund, disguised as Robin, training with the squires, her auburn hair hidden beneath her helmet, her determination evident in her every move. It showed her unmasking, Sir Hugh's expression a mixture of surprise and admiration. It showed their battles, their triumphs, their moments of love and loss, their unwavering commitment to justice and peace. Children would gather around the tapestry, their eyes wide with wonder, listening to the stories of their ancestors, the queen who had defied convention, the king who had stood by her side, the couple who had built a better world. The tapestry was not just a work of art, it was a source of inspiration, a reminder of the power of courage, of love, of forgiveness, of the enduring human spirit. It was a symbol of the kingdom's values, the principles that Rosamund and Sir Hugh had championed, the legacy they had left behind. One particular scene in the tapestry always drew the most attention. It depicted Rosamund and Sir Hugh, standing together on the balcony of their castle, overlooking their prosperous and peaceful kingdom, their faces etched with the wisdom of years, their hands clasped together, their love a beacon of hope. It was a scene of quiet triumph, of enduring peace, of a love that had conquered all. It was a scene that captured the essence of their reign, the culmination of their journey, the fulfillment of their destiny. The tapestry served as a constant reminder that even in the darkest of times, hope could flourish, that even the most formidable obstacles could be overcome, that love and loyalty could conquer all. It was a reminder that every individual, regardless of their gender, their social status, or their origin, had the potential to make a difference, to change the world, to create a legacy that would endure for generations to come. And so, the story of Rosamund and Sir Hugh lived on, woven into the tapestry, whispered in the halls of the castle, sung in the ballads of the bards, and etched in the hearts of the people. It was a story of a kingdom redeemed, a love that triumphed, and a legacy that would never be forgotten. The colors, vibrant as they were, told the tale of triumph over the impossible.